the Emergencies Act was invoked, that represented a failure. It represented a failure on a number of fronts. A failure on all levels of government to respond to the serious problem of the convoy. It meant that the Prime Minister didn't take it seriously. The Premier certainly didn't take it seriously. Doug Ford ignored it entirely. And the Mayor of Ottawa ignored the seriousness of the problem. And the problem was really clear. We had citizens that were being harassed and intimidated, food banks where staff were being harassed. This was an ongoing thing, not one-off scenarios. We had people that were wearing masks were being intimidated and harassed in the streets. People faced the worst lockdowns that they'd ever experienced throughout the pandemic in Ottawa. The citizens faced the worst of it because of the convoy. Businesses were shut down. Kids were struggling to go to school. People couldn't sleep at night. It was pretty horrible. And given how bad things were and how people were being targeted, all levels of government failed the people of Ottawa and also failed workers. Thousands of workers lost thousands of hours of work because of shutdowns at the border. And none of this was taken seriously. There was a failure of policing. It's very clear that all levels of policing also failed to take this seriously. It should never have got to this point. And so that's why I think that the commission, the work of the commission, is so important to identify how we can prevent those failures from happening, because it was as a result of all those levels of failure that we had to invoke the Emergencies Act, and that it was in no way a success. It was an example of the serious failures that occurred to get us to that point. So I'm hoping the commission will highlight how we can avoid getting to that point in the future.
What do you want to see addressed in the report once it is tabled?
Well, I'm hoping that there is a serious consideration of the problems in policing, the fact that there was a lot of evidence that came forward of police colluding with the convoy, supporting the convoy. And it's important to keep in mind, the convoy made their goals very clear. The convoy, the organizers, there's maybe many people that maybe didn't know this, or maybe people that were unaware or weren't participants, but the organizers, the central organizers, made it very clear what their goal was. Their goal was to overthrow the government. They didn't hide that. They stated it very boldly on a website. They've repeated it in numerous press conferences. They wanted to overthrow a democratically elected government with a committee of their own choosing. I mean, it was very clear what their goal was. And the fact that policing and other levels, other security forces were colluding with these folks is deeply concerning. Like, their goal was not an innocuous goal. Their goal was to overthrow government. And to replace it in a fascist way without having any elections, without having elected officials. Pretty serious that security forces were still working with them despite their very clear stated goal. So that's something that I hope is addressed. And again, the ultimate failures that got us to this point, I hope, are addressed. What can be done in the future to prevent that from happening?
Hi, it's